Recording will start soon. There we go. All right. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm really glad that you could all be here. As I mentioned, I had 65 people RSVP for this. So clearly this is a hot topic, and it's really understandable why that's the case today. And generally anxiety has been kind of on the rise, but with our current situation, it's exacerbating everything. So we're talking about anxiety in kids, but a lot of this will probably be applicable for you as adults too. For those of you who don't know me, I am Amanda Giordano. I'm the school counselor for Nettlehorst, for all of Nettlehorst, and I have my contact info on the last slide. So if you ever need to reach out, you can. I know most of you that are in here though, so I know that you know how to get in touch with me. So it would help if I'm on the right screen when I hit next. There we go. So what we're going to cover is we're going to cover what is anxiety. We're going to talk about healthy anxiety, unhealthy anxiety. We're going to talk a little bit about signs and symptoms, how to get help for anxiety, and then what you can do with your child to help them with their anxiety. I'm going to start with the video just because anxiety is really complex, and I think that it makes it easier to understand anxiety if we can make it a little bit more tangible. And so this video is something that I showed to our middle schoolers last year. A handful of 6th and 7th grade students saw this because I ironically had a mindfulness lesson and brain changes lesson planned for them the last week that we were in school before they sent us all home. So it was perfect timing in one way. In another way, there were like 7 students per class the day that I was scheduled to go into their room. So some of them got this and some of them didn't. So some of your kids may have seen this, but I really like the explanation of how the brain works, and it'll help lead us into this discussion about anxiety. Let's see if this will work with sound.
The more you understand how your brain works and how thoughts and emotions interact, the more control you can have over your thoughts and emotions. It's your brain. It's time for you to start controlling your own thoughts and emotions. So let's talk about how thoughts and feelings interact. We're going to break it down using a visual, the hand model. We're going to use our hand for this. Your thumb, folding it in, is the middle of your brain, your amygdala. Your fingertips, folding it around, is your prefrontal cortex, the front of your brain. We'll come back to this in a second. Our amygdala is really important in serious situations. For example, if you see a fire, it alerts you into action. It cuts off access to your prefrontal cortex where you think and reason, which is great. You don't need to calculate just how long it will take for the house to burn down. You just need to move. Back to your hand. Your amygdala in the center, with the fingers curled around, flips the prefrontal cortex lid. Flip the lid. Try it with me. Put your thumb in the middle, hold your fingertips, and force your fingertips over with your thumb, the amygdala. This could save your life in the fire situation. So we need our amygdala, but here's the problem. Your amygdala makes mountains out of molehills. So when there isn't a fire, and just say a pop quiz, your amygdala may react the same and flip your lid when there's no need to. When your lid is flipped, that's when your thoughts and emotions become muddled. When this happens, it means your thoughts are driven by your amygdala, and they are often distorted. This can fuel your worry or anxiety. So your lid is still flipped, and you need your prefrontal cortex to perform well on that pop quiz. So you have to find a way to get the prefrontal cortex to come down so you can think and reason. Bringing your lid down is tough for all of us. We'll dive further into that next.
Okay, so I really like that it brings the biology into anxiety, because anxiety can feel so intangible. And so right now I was saying that anxiety is kind of at an all-time high with everything that's going on because we're in this high stress state. And so we went into that kind of survival state. And so we're flipping our lids, and that's why we're a little bit more short-tempered these days. And so are our kids. And just, I think that it's nice to have those visuals and kind of understand how all those things relate. When our amygdala is on overdrive, our prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of all of our executive functioning, our time management, our organization, all of those great skills, we don't have access to that. That gets cut off. So that's why sometimes kids with anxiety can just all of a sudden they can't find anything. And so I think it gives a nice perspective on how the body works. So to define anxiety a little bit more, anxiety it can be a healthy thing. So when it's tolerable, when it's temporary, and when it's adaptive, when it's helping you respond to a situation, anxiety is fine. It is a survival mechanism. Like she said in the video, our anxiety tells us, maybe I should move away from this fire, right? It is an adaptive response to stress. And so in small doses, it's totally normal and can be protective. But when it becomes overwhelming, when it's always there, when you're always bothered by these worries or these fears, when it's disruptive to everyday life, that's when anxiety becomes unhealthy. When you're always on high alert, that's not how anxiety is supposed to operate. And it actually kind of wires you to see danger in places where it doesn't exist, like the pop quiz. It's a normal part of schooling. It's not going to be the end of your day for a normal person, but a person with anxiety, those small things can just set them off and cause them to flip their lid. So when thinking about unhealthy anxiety, the signs kind of run the gamut. And I know this was one of the questions that someone submitted. What kind of signs can you look for in a child who might be experiencing unhealthy anxiety? It can be everything from visible distress, where you can see that they're kind of just trembling at things that aren't developmentally appropriate for them to be bothered by. Sometimes they'll react with anger. They get really frustrated that things are hard or that things are scared or scary. And so they might, lash out and explode in situations where they're anxious. They might talk about their fears all the time, or you've got the kids that internalize everything and they get the stomach aches and the headaches, and that can be their primary symptom. Or unfortunately, lots of times children with anxiety fly under the radar because they do internalize. If they're a kid that isn't talking about their fears and isn't showing, like, they're not, the trembling or the flushed or sweating, they hold it together. Unfortunately, when we think about some other mental health issues that might lead to more disruptive behaviors, anxiety disorders they can be masked pretty easily by students, and especially school age students. They tend to fly under the radar. They don't call attention to themselves, and so it tends to be a little bit harder to notice in kids. In terms of factors, this was another question that I got. What leads to anxiety? It's usually a combination of factors. So genetics play a role. Students' general temperament can play a role, and the amount of stress or trauma in their lives. And so again, right now we're living in a pandemic. Our way of life has changed, and a lot of us are touched by all different kinds of loss, whether it's financial instability, housing instability, loss of loved ones. That's all trauma. And so even if a student didn't have anxiety before, living through this period of trauma could be enough to develop some of that anxiety in them right now, and adults as well. And so any of those factors together can cause anxiety. And then in terms of prevalence, 1 in 5 children are diagnosed with anxiety disorders, and it's more often diagnosed in girls than in boys. And I'm not going to dive deep into anxiety disorders, but I just wanted to touch on the fact that there are lots of them. And a lot of times a student or a person who has one anxiety disorder is likely to have another, it's called comorbid, so have more than one anxiety disorder. And so generalized anxiety disorder, it sounds like its name, it's general anxiety about things. Separation anxiety, again, you can figure that one out. Social anxiety, pretty straightforward. Panic disorder is when you have those panic attacks that are, you're not quite sure where they're coming from, and then you start to have fear of having those attacks in the future. Selective mutism is an anxiety-related disorder. Obsessive compulsive disorder is another anxiety-based disorder, because the obsessions and the compulsions actually serve to decrease that anxiety. Although they don't in reality, but that's the purpose of the obsessive and compulsive behaviors. And then specific phobia would be that one thing, if you're deathly afraid of blood, or you're deathly afraid of dogs for no apparent reason, or maybe there is an underlying reason, and it's interfering with your everyday. So those are the main anxiety disorders. And if you do think that your child is just struggling with unhealthy anxiety, if they've been experiencing these symptoms for a long period of time and things aren't improving, if it's interfering with their everyday functioning, their quality of life, I do encourage you to reach out for help. And there are a bunch of different options for starting that process. You can talk to your pediatrician and get referrals. You can check with your insurance company. You can either call or look online. And usually with insurance, or not usually, but at least sometimes they put therapy and counseling into the behavioral health section of resources. The Psychology Today website has listings of mental health professionals, and they do have a special section for telehealth right now. And then the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI Chicago, you can call their line and they can help connect you with resources and providers in the Chicago area. So I do have a link for the Psychology Today website, where if you click on that little link. So beyond the getting professional support for a child who's experiencing unhealthy anxiety, there's a lot that you can do as a parent for the everyday anxiety, or just the anxiety that your child is experiencing now because of the situation we're in. So one thing to remember is, don't be a helicopter parent. I know that it's really hard to watch your child struggle through things, and especially things that should be everyday, easy things to accomplish. But by hovering, you're actually reinforcing their fear, and it's sending the message that there is something to be afraid of, or that the child can't get through it on their own, that they do in fact need your help to make it through this situation. So letting your kid do as much as they can on their own, or kind of baby stepping them up a ladder of things that are difficult for them to do, in a level of increasing difficulty, is a really good strategy. And make sure that you're managing your own anxieties, which I know is really hard right now. But we model for our kids how to handle stressful situations and how to use coping skills. And if you're nervous all the time, then your child is going to, again, think that there is reason to fear. So kind of putting on your own oxygen mask, or at least, fake it till you make it, for the sake of your kid. And then remind your kid that feelings are valid. Whatever they're feeling is fine. And feelings are temporary. Let them know that they can express how they're feeling without being judged. Because again, a lot of anxiety disorders fly under the radar because kids are really good at internalizing. And so if they take that risk and they open up and they share how they're feeling, they share that they're scared, reassure them so that they're comfortable with expressing themselves in the future. And they won't just keep it bottled up inside. So when you do have a kid who you think is anxious, or they do come to you and say, I've really been worried about this thing, that thing, or the other, there's obviously a right way and a wrong way to handle it. And so we've got some examples here, and you can read through and you can kind of, figure out why some of the wrong ones are the wrong ones to say. But I think that it's good to have these in mind. The thing to remember about anxiety is that it does become a wiring thing. And so even if a fear doesn't make sense to you, it doesn't mean that it's not real to the kid. And so to say something like, well, I'm really not sure what you're worried about, that's fine, but it's not negating the fact that your kid is really worried about it. It's not going to make them feel better to say there's nothing to be afraid of, because the fact is they are afraid. And so saying that there's nothing to be afraid of is telling them that what they're feeling is wrong, and then they'll become unlikely to share in the future. So instead, make them a partner and say, okay, well, let's work through this together. You're validating that they are feeling afraid, and then they know that they don't have to do it alone. Just saying, I know this is hard. There's no judgment in that, right? You're not saying like, I don't think that your fear is real, or that's not something to be afraid of. Like, you're acknowledging that they're in a hard situation. A really good strategy is to ask, what is your worry telling you? Because then it starts to tease out that worry is a separate entity. They are not worry. They have worried thoughts. And so what's your worry telling you? What's your worried brain saying? Can be a really good way to separate their feelings from their identity. And then on the flip side, what would your thinking brain tell you? So you can create these two kind of, opposite personas in the child's thinking. And they can start to put on their detective hat and realize when it's just worry that's running amok versus like something factual that they should be afraid of, when it's a pop quiz versus a fire in the kitchen that's freaking them out. So the next thing, I'm going to go through some really specific coping strategies, and then I have some general coping strategies for you too. Wherever you see, you're not going to see it on this slide, but wherever you see a starburst that says I'm linked or we're linked, that's a resource that you're going to get. So first is to describe the cognitive behavioral triangle with your kid. And you don't have to use the big fancy words, cognitive behavioral, but for you adults, I wanted you to be familiar with the language. It's just teaching our thoughts, our behaviors, and our feelings are all in this triangle that influence each other. That's a good question. I'll get back to that in a second. So what we think influences how we feel. So we've got a picture here. These two boys are having completely different reactions to this dog. And so you can imagine that the one kid is thinking, oh my goodness, it's a big scary dog and it's probably going to bite me. And so he feels scared. And then his reaction would probably be to hide, to cry, to run away. And then the kid on the right is thinking, look at the fluffy puppy. I can't wait to pet it. And he's smiling, and he will probably go over and pet it. And so you can see how those thoughts really affect the way that those children are handling that situation. And so I do talk about this with kids at school. And in fifth grade, we actually had a whole bunch of scenarios last year we went through, and they had to write out the two different thoughts, feelings, and behaviors for each side. And so the kids, they can get it, if you put it in the right terms for them. But it helps to demonstrate your thoughts are separate from you, but they're a part of you. And so if you can control your thoughts, you can control how you feel, and then you can control what you do. And you can also kind of like reverse engineer that and like, well, what would you like to do in this situation? Well, would you rather pet the dog, or would you rather run away crying? Okay, well, let's see, like, what kind of a feeling do we need to have to be comfortable petting the dog? Maybe happy. Okay, well, what kinds of thoughts can maybe make us feel a little bit more happy than the big dog is scary? And so you can start at any of those points on the triangle and just talk about how they relate, and how if you change one piece, everything else changes. If you have a kid who doesn't know that they're worried, you can, it might be helpful just to start talking about body signs of being worried. If you can think of a situation where they have been worried and they would probably agree with you that they're worried, you can say, how that one time that you were worried about XYZ, how did that feel in your body? Did you have butterflies in your stomach? Did you get really warm? Were your hands sweaty? Was your heart racing? Do you feel any of that now? Do you think that this might be, that you're feeling worried? Or, gee, it looks, the way that you look, or the way that you're acting now kind of reminds me of when I see someone who was worried. Do you think that you're worried now? And, maybe that'll help them identify with that feeling. Maybe not, but it is a strategy to try. And I'll keep thinking about that. So another really good coping strategy, and this has been my go-to strategy since we've been stuck at home, is the circle of control. So there's always something that we can control in a situation. We just need to figure out what it is. And I kind of go through this flow chart, and sometimes I will say this out loud to myself. Okay, is this something I can control? Yes or no? If it is, okay, what am I going to do about it? What steps am I going to take to make this situation better? If it's not something I can control, well, how am I going to control my reaction to it? So, I can't control that I'm stuck at home right now because of the pandemic, but I can change my thinking about it. I can say, well, instead of being, oh, I'm stuck at home, I get to be safe at home, comfortable with my dogs, and sleep in the morning. Two totally different ways of looking at the situation instead of just harping on the fact that this is horrible, this is terrible. And then it gives a sense of control, right? And so I'm working with a kid who, you know, kid problems, friend problems. And it's like, well, I want my parent to talk to somebody else. I'm like, well, having your parent talk to someone else's parent is taking all the control away from you. What's one thing that you can do about the situation? Because, I want you to feel like you can fix problems. And so you can use this in all sorts of situations. I also have this I can control, I cannot control. You will get a copy of this, and this one's about the pandemic specifically. And then I also have one linked at the end that's just a fill in your own. So, what are all of the things that you can control? What are all the things you can't control? For some kids, it's okay to say, try letting go of the things that you can't control. For some kids who do have real anxious tendencies, it's hard for them to let it go, right? Their brain is just wired to ruminate and those thoughts spin. But for some kids, it is enough to say, okay, you can't control what other people do, so let go of that, and then let's replace it with what can you control about it. You can't control that so and so is talking about you in group chats, but you can control leaving the group chat, or you can tell your friends, I don't want to hear it if somebody else is talking about me. There's always something that kids can control, and that gives them power, especially in a situation where we tend to feel really powerless right now. You can also help your child challenge unhelpful thoughts. We all have these. We all have just some faulty thoughts for whatever reason, but kids who are anxious tend to have them more often and tend to have a harder time seeing through them and breaking out of them. So these are the most common unhelpful thinking styles. And again, like, we all experience these, but when it's always black or white, it's always, I have to get a 95 or higher, or else it's going to be the end of the world. That's when it becomes problematic. That's when it's interfering with their function. That's when they start to fear those quizzes, and they will take, an hour on a task that could have taken 20 minutes because their perfectionism is just driven by anxiety, because they're this black or white. It's either a 95 and I succeed, or else I'm a failure. And, whatever that means for them. Overgeneralizing, if you see something happened once and you're assuming that it's always going to happen, it's just not healthy. And so pointing some of those out, oh, it seems like you're kind of like in a really black or white thought process right now. Do you think there's any middle ground? Helping them realize that some of these are unhelpful can open their eyes to ways to change their thoughts. And I will say that catching unhelpful thoughts and changing them takes a lot of work, but it's really worth it if kids stick with it and have help from parents. So you will get a copy of this so that you can read through all the rest of these unhelpful thoughts. These are also called cognitive distortions, if any of you are familiar with psychology lingo. They're just distorted ways of thinking about things. And so then on the opposite end of that, on catching the unhelpful thinking, shift to positive thinking. So find whatever positives you can in a situation. Look for the silver lining. Maybe look through your best friend's eyes. Look through the person's perspective who you really, really trust. So if there's an athlete that they love, okay, what would so-and-so say about this? Shifting to gratitude. I know that anxious kids, like I said, ruminate a whole lot, and so they can get stuck in that negative pattern. And keeping a gratitude journal can be a really nice way to remind the brain that there is positive, break up that negative thought cycle, and shift to the positive. This positive strategies poster is linked to explanations for all of those ideas there. And so you'll have all of that at your disposal. And then I've got these coping cards. So just having a little mantra. It may not seem like it now, but this feeling will eventually pass. Sometimes kids really need to hear that, to remember it. And so this is 40, I think it's a set of 40 different cards that can be printed, and they can print them, and they can I think they're set to print full size, but you can play with the settings so that they're smaller, so they're like baseball card size, and they can stay in your kid's pocket, or they can make a poster out of it and they can post it on their wall, and that can be their mantra. It's okay to ask for help. And the more they see it, maybe the more they'll feel comfortable with that, and they will learn to ask for help when they need it. So other strategies that are helpful for anxiety could be deep breathing. The process of deep breathing is, it actually physiologically slows the heart rate down, and can slow down the thoughts in the mind. And so deep breathing is really, really helpful for anxiety. Even just a short minute of some kind of deep breathing exercise can have a really big effect on reducing anxiety. And then progressive muscle relaxation is really helpful for anxiety too, because anxiety and relaxation are opposites. And that's why things like deep breathing are so helpful too. They can't really exist at the same time. And so doing progressive muscle relaxation would be just tensing your muscles one group at a time, from head to toe or toe to head. And you're really helping your kid create that feeling of tension in the body. And then when they release, they can feel the sensation of that release. And when you have, especially younger kids, do something like progressive muscle relaxation or a breathing exercise, and you ask them how they feel afterwards, a lot of them will interestingly say tired or sleepy. But that kind of makes sense, because that's when you're calm, when you're tired, it's when your body is slowed down and you don't have that tension built up. And so that progressive muscle relaxation creates that body understanding of tension versus relaxation. Obviously, talking to you or to another adult, I'm always available to talk to kids. That can be really helpful so that they get their worries out of their mind. Journaling or drawing can be really great too. Some kids aren't comfortable with the words, or they just can't find the words, especially, like I said, when we flip our lid, we don't have access to our prefrontal cortex, or we're running out of a purely emotional state. And so some kids really just can't connect the dots to find the words to express how they're feeling out loud. And so maybe journaling or drawing is the way that they can express themselves. For some, it can be a really nice distraction too. I've got some Zen coloring books, and that's one of my really big helps when I'm feeling nervous. So whatever works for them. And then exercising too. It runs off some of that extra energy, extra buzz, and can help slow that brain down. And I did do a mindfulness event, it was a whole month ago at this point, and it has a bunch of links to mindfulness resources. If you missed the event, then you can click here and you can get the slide deck with all of those links. And then some other resources for you. The Child Mind Institute is a really helpful website for all sorts of mental health and learning disability topics. And I've linked directly to their anxiety page, all sorts of articles for parents. The Mindshift app is a really nice anxiety-based app, and it's a free download. It's available for Android and Apple. And then the Algoma Family Services website has a ton of really great ideas and articles and parent resources. Mental Health America has, I don't even know how many different screening tools, mental health screening tools. And they have some that are specifically for parents to complete about their children. And it's just kind of it's not meant to diagnose, but it can help you kind of, you can even print out the answers and take it to your pediatrician. And it gives you just a couple of different things to consider about, am I seeing this from my kid? Am I seeing that from my kid? And it can be something to put things into perspective for you. And then again, start that conversation with the pediatrician. These are the things that I'm seeing. And then there's a really nice book called Freeing Your Child from Anxiety that I would recommend if you have a child who you want to figure out how to help them. It has a lot of different strategies, some that I've touched on here. And so I would recommend that one. And then I have some more worksheets. All of these are linked for you to have. So you will get these. We've got that, circle of control. There's another version for slightly older kids with the checklists, a positive self-talk challenge. And this breaking down our thoughts is that process of those unhelpful thinking styles, kind of turning those around, dissecting those and getting to the bottom of them. And there's a second page that actually has some relaxation techniques there. And then this is my contact information. So if you want to email me, you can email me. You can set up an appointment through my Calendly page. It's linked to my calendar, so you can see my availability and just sign yourself up for an appointment either by Google Meet or over the phone. And I'm here to partner with you. I know there's a lot going on, and I know that anxiety is a hard thing to deal with. And so I'm here to just kind of, if you want to pick my brain, if you're looking for strategies, feel free to reach out and we can talk. But, I appreciate you being here. It's really important that, you're arming yourself with information and resources to help your kids, because they're facing a lot right now. So thank you for doing what you can to help support them. So I just covered a ton, and I did that really quickly, a lot faster than I expected to. So are there more questions? Or any good shares? Oh, thanks, Liz. You're welcome. Okay.
Hi, Mrs. Giordano. This is Jordan's mom. He's a second grader there.
Okay. I know,
And
I
he
know, Jordan,
adores
he was
you.
in Miss Gunderson's class last year, right?
Yes, and now he has Mr. Hill. Yes. So I have a quick question. So, as Jordan matures, he is expressing his anxiety, in different ways. And so my question is, if he has an experience during class, would you suggest, and of course I'll follow up, with the meeting, would you suggest stepping in or allowing it to play out? Because you said something really key for me, which is knowing, sometimes not ignoring it, but just letting it happen. So what would you suggest in an experience like that?
Yeah, I would say, Jordan best. And so if you know that it's something that he can probably work through, let him work through it. If it's something that, I think that stepping in to give a reminder or to, maybe offer some kind of coping strategy is never a bad idea. It's not like you're stepping in to take away whatever's causing the anxiety. But if you see that he's frustrated and you say, you know what, it looks like you're getting anxious or you're getting frustrated, maybe it takes 3 deep breaths. I think that's an okay thing to do.
Okay.
Like I said, that prefrontal cortex is turned off. And so our brains aren't making those connections. So even if on a good day, he can go, I'm frustrated, I'm going to breathe. That might not always be the case. And this month, I've been doing zones of regulation check-ins with kids. And I should have put that in there. Maybe I'll add that in. So zones of regulation is a blue, yellow, red, or green check-in. I'm actually just going to pull this visual up because it's probably easier for me. Oh, good. I can tell that the kids like the zones of regulation because they just latched onto it so fast, and they made me realize this change that I needed to do, like this missed opportunity in my lessons. My lessons this month were all about coping skills in first through fifth grade. And so I started with this zones check-in. And then when I asked the kids, well, what zone, or no, I said, what kind of feeling do you think this coping skill would help with? They all started holding up their numbers from the zone check-in. And I was like, well, duh, of course, if I led with that as their feeling check-in, I should have used that as their, their touchstone for what do you think this would help with. But they picked it up so quickly. I was so impressed. So this is the zones of regulation. I wish I could make this bigger, but I can't. Oh, I know what I'm missing. Let me do this. So zones of regulation groups similar feelings based on how much energy really goes into them. And so that green zone is when you've got a medium amount of energy and you're ready to set, you can focus. If you have a little bit less energy, you're in that blue zone. So you're sad, you're sick, you're tired, you're bored, just generally moving slowly. A little extra energy, you're in that yellow zone. And then the highest energy level is in that red zone. And so all of the, I think kindergarten through fifth grade kids have seen this. And so you can ask them what zone they're in and say, okay, well, what strategies do you need when you're in that yellow zone? If you've got an anxious kid, if their anxiety is just a little anxious, they'd be in that yellow zone. Well, what do you need right now for your yellow zone? What would help you get back to the green? And the message isn't that any zone is bad, because all of our feelings are okay, but we work the best and we feel the best when we're in that green zone. So what's going to help you get to that green zone? And so that could be the conversation that you have with Jordan. You know what, it looks like you're in that yellow zone. What would be a coping strategy that, what's a coping skill or something that you can do to help you get back to that green zone? It's not helicoptering. It's just helping guide him to what he needs in that moment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Amanda, this is Erica. I'm the one that said I have a son in 3rd grade, and he has struggled with anxiety, and we have been talking with a counselor at the Family Institute about it. And he said one really interesting thing to me that I thought I'd share just in case it connects with anybody else. But we were really annoyed at the beginning of the school year with our son because he was like, would bring some of his stuffed animals in, and like we were like, oh man, like we don't see anybody else with stuffed animals on the Zoom, like like you're too old for this, that kind of stuff. And so I brought it up to his therapist, and he was like, you know what, he's like, if it's not distracting him, if it's not distracting the class, he's like, let him have it. He's like, because some kids need something to just help them focus, or like put them at, ease in a new situation or whatever. And so I was, of course, then there's so much guilt in parenting, right? Of course, I like felt awful because it was like, oh God, I was like trying to take away like his stuffed animal. And so the therapist even went so far as to say, like, if the teacher mentions it to you, that like I will write her a note. And of course the teacher never has, and whatever, I was blowing it out of proportion, but it was just something that I just never would have thought of. And so now it's kind of like he's set up this little crazy area that he loves sitting in now. You know what I mean? Like he kind of made it his own. And I just felt like things got so much better after that. So if anybody else out there has seen anything like that, I just felt like I should share it.
Yeah. And this is probably before me. I don't want to take the credit for that, but I might meet the counselor lesson. And we started with a battery level check-in. That was just how much energy do you have? And I said, it's good to check in with your body, because if you're a 3 or a 4, your battery's super full, you might need a fidget there with you. And I even showed them my fidget. I've got this little plastic dinosaur puzzle toy, and that's my fidget when I'm a 3 or a 4 battery. So when I'm in that yellow or red zone, I need my fidget. So have your fidget. And all the kids started showing their squishy balls or their stuffies and their fidget cubes. So if that was me, sorry, but also you're welcome.
Yeah, no, I think it's awesome. And he did mention that, like, he explained all the zones to me, and I was kind of like, wow, that's, it really connected with him. So thank you.
You're welcome. That's amazing. I'm going to make sure to put the zones in this before I send it out to all of you. That's great. And yeah, setting up a calm space is a great thing too. It's one of my goals whenever we go back to hybrid, that every classroom is going to have a calm corner with some ideas. Ideally, it would have had a bunch of fidgets, but not with the pandemic. But having just some visuals of the different feelings, probably just the zones. Now that I've used it with all the kids, and so you can do that in your own house too. And they can have their own fidgets because they're theirs. Anybody else questions or thoughts or tips you want to share? I love the exchange of ideas. Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me, for being here, and for supporting your kids. I have not, because we are recruiting more students, so I will be sending out an email. I'm starting a middle school group on anxiety hopefully next week. And then I am starting to organize some other small groups. And if you have a kid who you think would benefit, I've got all sorts of topics, resiliency, growth mindset, mindfulness, anxiety, just a matter of scheduling, because they all have free times at the same time, and I'm one person. So, but let me know. I would love to include your kids in small groups if they'd benefit and want to be a part. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful night. And confidence and self-esteem is in 2 weeks, and I am looking at other topics to add for second quarter. So I will update you when I've got that all figured out. But thank you so much for your time tonight. It was good to see you all. Take care.